Everybody, welcome to the Basis Points Podcast. I'm Kevin Flanagan, head of fixed income strategy at Wisdom Tree Asset Management. Here we are now, about halfway through the first month of 2025, and wanted to talk about this being the year of the uninverted yield curve. If you remember last week, I continued to talk about our rate normalization theme and specifically focusing on where the Treasury 10-year yield could possibly be headed. But this time around, I wanted to expand on the topic a bit and address our base case that Treasury yield curves have begun to normalize as well and will remain positively sloped here in 2025. And just a reminder, when we're discussing Treasury yield curves, the two most closely watched gauges are the 2-year versus 10-year and the 3-month versus 10-year constructs. Remember, there is Fed funds versus the 10-year, but that's not just specifically Treasuries. That's why just a little nuance here on what we'll be talking about. And I just wanted to provide some facts and forecasts here, just real briefly, just to give everybody a sense, some perspective. Now, remember, Treasury yield curves, they enter inverted or negative territory in the mid to latter portion of 2022. And really remain there until just relatively recently. And this move back into uninverted territory was the direct result of not only the Fed's rate cuts, but also the shifting macro narrative back to moderate growth and bumpy inflation. Remember, if you go back to just a few short months ago in mid-September, we were looking at aggressive Fed rate cutting expectations, as well as the economy could finally be buckling, inflation was continuing to improve, and things have changed pretty dramatically since then. So as I'm talking to you now, the 2-year, 10-year, and 3-month 10-year yield curves now carry positive readings of about 40 and 45 basis points respectively. And we're expecting the curve to remain in positive territory regardless of whether the Fed cuts rates or not this year. Remember, there's a few ways to think about how you get the shape or slope of a yield curve, right? And I think one of the key, effects from the Fed cutting rates 100 basis points is you brought those short-term rates that we're talking about, 2-year notes, 3-month T-bills, we brought them down in the process, right? In the case of the 3-month T-bill, it's almost a one-for-one characterization. 100 basis point rate cuts, 100 basis points drop essentially in the 3-month T-bill. And when you get, at the same time, this latest increase in the 10-year Treasury yield, voila, you're in positive territory. And remember, even with the Fed cutting 100 basis points, the 10-year Treasury yield is up 120 basis points since about mid-September. So although the curves are back into the plus side of the column by those numbers I just mentioned, they're still visibly below the positive readings that were being registered at this same time 2 years ago. And still, even though you're in that positive territory, I think 40, 45 basis points is still kind of characterized as the slope being relatively flat. Once you start seeing movements 100, 150, or maybe close to 200 basis points, then you have a different ballgame. But right now, we're still in the relatively flat yield curve environment. So, final thought here. Positioning within the U.S. fixed income arena has become an exercise of managing both volatility and duration. We've seen time and time again, extending duration has proven to be a fleeting strategy. And I don't see that changing in the months ahead. And that's despite the fact that the Treasury yield curves have now uninverted. So I'm going to leave it there. I hope everybody has a great rest of the week and be well.